The web is your oyster. Welcome everyone to a video where I'm going to talk about some of the projects I've worked on previously with web scraping. These were kind of just fun things that I did for work where just kind of wanted to test my skills, expand on them, etc., etc. And so yeah, these are just some kind of fun things I did. And I want you to remember that as you go through this course, that the web is your oyster, right? There's so much information out there that you could gain so much from. So, as we go through this, keep on, letting those creative juices flow and think about possible solutions you can find or things you can use from web data. So first off, 2 years ago, I like basketball, I like watching basketball, I like the NBA. So, bringing these things together, I ended up finding a bunch of information on injuries of basketball players. And we use this to create a super rudimentary, predictive thing looking at what injuries players sustained and on average how long were they out for, right? So the information I pulled was just a bunch of lists of NBA player, the team that they played for, the injury that they went out with, and then the date that was, and then ultimately the date that they came back. And so I literally just took all that information, web scraped it, and did a bunch of ridiculous things in Excel that allowed me to filter on what body part, what type of injury, and then ultimately kind of estimating, though poorly, but still kind of looked cool, estimating how long a player would be out with a certain injury. So that was super cool, super fun. Another thing I did was ended up just going to a bunch of news websites and just looking at headlines and searching for names, right? So, for example, would load up news site, whatever, that we were ethically allowed to scrape, which we'll go over more in another video. Anyway, and it would just search for certain names, right? So this is pretty close and made pretty close to the 2020 election cycle. So this was when these individuals pictured were running for the Democratic nomination. So I had something that would or a program that would just go to a web page and ultimately count how many mentions of Bloomberg, Warren, Bernie, or Sanders, Biden, Pete, or Klobuchar. And so it would just kind of give a count of each of those. And this was just testing out some code that I'd written and finding it kind of an interesting way to use it. So another kind of cool thing to look at trends in the news and potentially guess at what those things mean. And then our last example was actually inspiration I received inspiration I got from my lovely source of many things from Reddit. And so scraped from a website, just ratings that consumers gave to TV shows by episode over time. So what this could create was singular charts that showed how the ratings changed for a series over time. So, for example, if you were remotely on any sort of social media or alive or opened any sort of news source in the summer? I don't remember when it was. Whenever the last season of Game of Thrones came out, everyone was complaining about how terrible the last season was. So, if you actually look at their trend over time, you can see they start off pretty high, it goes up a little bit, and then ultimately in the last 2 seasons it drops just a ton. So this was a cool thing I was able to do by just web scraping, right? Finding a website that had ratings for shows, and just looking at those changes, scraping that information from lots of different pages and lots of things, but automating all of that and making it so I could create charts and more interesting things to look at that kind of showed a certain trend over time. So anyway, that's the general gist of the examples I have to share right now today. Hopefully you feel like you kind of have a greater understanding of the power of web scraping and the cool things that you can do with it. And maybe you're starting to generate your own ideas. Yeah, if you are, super cool. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or reach out to us through our email, webextractors@gmail.com. Okay, guys, thanks again.